I think it's probably okay for us to get going. Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Grasso. I use she, her pronouns, and I work in the Complete Streets program here at Locomotion. I'm here with my colleague, Jonathan Weber, Complete Streets Program Manager, to host today's webinar. For those of you who don't know about Locomotion, our mission is to make biking and walking a way of life across Vermont. So first of all, thank you all for being here today. I'm really excited for this learning event, and I think you'll find it super interesting. Just a few housekeeping details before we get started. If you check out the GoToWebinar control panel, you can pick how you get your audio by choosing either audio through the phone or through your computer. If you're having trouble hearing, we recommend that you try the phone. We'll have everyone muted throughout the webinar, but we'll be monitoring the chat for any questions you might have. We have a lot of information to cover today, but we'll leave time at the end of the webinar to answer a few questions. So I encourage you to put questions and comments in the chat whenever they come to you. You can also raise your hand to ask questions on the GoToWebinar control panel during the Q&A. If you have any technical issues, you can post them in the chat box or contact me at susan@locomotion.org. So let's get started. Our speaker today is Dr. Peter Firth. Peter is a researcher and professor at Northeastern University, known for his work in transit planning, traffic signals, and bicycle infrastructure. He holds bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees from MIT. Peter has authored over 70 publications in the transportation research field and was a contributing author to the NACTO Urban Bikeway Design Guide. He has received the Best Paper Award from the Transportation Research Board 3 times, most recently in 2023. Peter is also the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycling Professionals for his work on level of traffic stress, which is the topic of today's presentation. So Peter, that was a mouthful. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'll hand things over to you.
Thanks, Susan. Hey, I'm really glad to be here with you all. It's true that I'm a professor and a researcher at Northeastern University. It's also true that I'm an advocate for safer, better bicycling facilities. And of course, I mostly do my advocacy here where I live in Boston, but I'm really glad to support advocates across the country, and glad to support you all. So I'm going to share my screen so you can follow along this presentation that I give. So there are really 2 subjects that are closely tied together: level of traffic stress and bike network plan. It turns out that people before me have thought about traffic stress and on for bikes, and people before me had thought about bike networks, but I said, unless you put the 2 together in a good systematic way, neither one of them makes sense. So let me explain what I mean. First, about traffic stress. Most of the population, it's no secret, just has a low tolerance for traffic stress. Most people would say, oh yeah, I'm willing to ride a bike on a nice, quiet local street like this. And although you can see some bicycles are there, most people would say, I am not so eager to ride a bike on a street like this. If you look back a little bit further, there's some bicycles here. There's a bike lane between these 2 lanes of moving cars and this row of parked cars. And now, when I say low tolerance, I don't mean, that people are intolerant in some negative sense. I mean, they're intolerant like in the biological sense, that a plant might be intolerant to salt water. If you put this environment around me, bicycling just dies. It just vanishes. People leave their bikes in their garage, except for when they go on a summer vacation, for instance. And when I say traffic stress, most people understand the term right away. It's the sense of danger that you feel around you. And if you're a cyclist like me, you know that when you sense danger, you put stress on yourself. You're gotta look constantly if somebody might be going to open a door. What if there's a stick in the road and I have to veer a little bit to the left because there's no room on the left because a truck might hit me? And so that is traffic stress. I have to say, when I learned what traffic stress is when I went to live in the Netherlands. I got the chance to live there for a year, and I discovered, wow, bicycling is different here. I'm not constantly scanning for threats. That was my life, riding a bike in Boston, constantly scanning for threats. So now I always want to add, when I'm talking about traffic stress, I'm not talking about safety, but people think about safety. So here, I just want to make a point. If you go down to the bottom, that's traffic stress. That's what we perceive as unsafety. It feels unsafe. If you go up to the very top, and you've got something that's measurable. How many bike crashes are there? And people in the traffic safety world, they are used to equating crashes with the middle thing, which is unsafety. And for autos, that's legit. I mean, how do you know if a road is unsafe? Well, because a lot of people are crashing there. How do you know an intersection is unsafe? A lot of people are crashing there. But with bicyclists, no, because when a place feels and is unsafe, the main response of normal people is don't ride your bike. And when people don't ride, well, then there aren't very many crashes. So you might have a spot that doesn't have that many crashes, but it's horribly unsafe. That's why nobody's riding their bike there. So you can't just evaluate unsafety, or people call it safety, but really they mean unsafety, for bicyclists by counting the number of crashes. A road can be unsafe even though there aren't many crashes because children are staying away, women are staying away, people who are a little bit new to bicycling are staying away, and that's not what we want. So Roger Geller, who's the bike coordinator for the city of Portland, has done a great job there. He said, to help us frame our bike planning, we got to recognize that the population is not the same with respect to their tolerance for traffic stress. He said, I think there's a group called Strong and Fearless that will ride in anything. And then there's another small group called Enthused and Confident. They love bicycles. They just love riding so much that they're willing to ride in, what other people would think of as a pretty stressful situation. But the majority is interested but concerned. I'm interested. When I go on vacation, we always ride bikes. And if I had a safe way to ride a bike, to use a bike to do errands or even to get to work, it sounds appealing, but I'm concerned. I don't think it's safe. And Roger said, we've got to stop the way we've been doing things, which is let's make bike facilities for the first two groups. And we've got to start making bike facilities for that interested but concerned group. You're just never going to, if the goal of bike network planning, it's being done with government money, it's your taxes and mine that are paying for it. So if the goal is to make a big difference for society, you're not going to get that difference unless you get a lot of people bicycling. And then you'll see big positive impacts in public health, in safety on the roads, in emissions and climate. We'll see big benefits only if we get a lot of people bicycling, and you're not going to get that if you're only going for the enthused and confident. So I followed up on what Roger had done by saying, let's classify road segments by level of traffic stress. So LTS 1, 2, 3, 4, the lowest stress. LTS 1 is just very little stress. A child, once they're capable of managing the vehicle and they can, and they got some skills, you need some skills to be able to cross a street, for instance. But once they got that, then the children should be able to ride. LTS 2 is what most adults will accept. And I based LTS 2 on what do Dutch roads look like, because in Holland, almost everybody is riding a bike. I think 80% of the population rides a bike at least once a week. And 26% of all trips in the country are made by bike. LTS 3 and 4 for the other two groups. And then, and you might think, well, why are we so foolish in our country that we would make bike facilities for that would only serve a tiny number of people? Well, we do. And it's partly because that tiny number of people had an outsized influence on bicycling design guides. They've had an outsized influence on bicycle advocacy organizations. For the most part, people who are asking for more bike stuff, well, they're riding bikes. And what you've done is you've turned off the majority of the population, you're going to get this subpopulation. And so I like to show people this example of a bike facility. Let's see if this link works. In California, built in 100% in compliance with California's road design, 100% in compliance with the AASHTO, American Association of State Transportation Officials design guide. And as I zoom in here, you see this little lane here? This, folks, is a bike lane. Yes, believe it or not, that is a bike lane. If I come in Street View.
Hey, Peter, we're actually just seeing the slide with the link on it.
Oh, okay. How about now?
Not yet. Still seeing PowerPoint.
All right, that's good input. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay, how about now? Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So yeah, if I take a look at this, it's been changed now, so you got to go back. They finally got around to changing it. But if I go back to 2017, you can see here, there's a bike lane. Okay, there's a bike lane against the curve. And then the bike lane sort of disappears. And then the bike lane reappears here. You've got 2 travel lanes on your right. You got 2 lanes of traffic on your left. The speed limit is 55 miles an hour. And this is a bike facility. This was made for people to ride their bike on while cars are zooming by on the right and left. It's insane. And this was the state of American road design and bicycle planning practice until, I don't know, 1915, 1916, 2000, and the guides that we have today, some of those guides, the national guide, still supports this kind of idiocy. So let's go back to hopefully the slideshow is now showing.
Still seeing Google Map.
All right, then I'll just undo my sharing and reshare. All right.
Very good.
All right. All right. So we have this kind of idiocy going on in the US. Meanwhile, if we go to Holland, and I don't say we should copy everything in Holland. It's, every country has its pluses and minuses, but Holland is we don't have to imagine a place where kind of everybody rides a bike. There is a place. So if it works there, well, then that shows that it works. So here are Dutch criteria about speed and separation from traffic. In the upper left of the matrix, you see there's a place for bikes to be in mixed traffic. In the lower right, you'll see there's a place that bikes should be in a cycle track, meaning a separated bike path, physically separated bike path. And then the middle area, it could be a bike lane as well as a cycle track. And so where is mixed traffic okay? And the answer is only on two-way streets with no center line. Only on two-way streets where there's no center line. And the no center line is important because when there's no center line, it means that cars are constantly adjusting their position for each other. When you don't see any car coming on a quiet street with no center line, you tend to drive down the middle. Then you see a car coming, then you move a little bit to the right. Cars are adjusting position for one another. And so that makes it really feel comfortable. They're going to adjust their position for you on a bike as well. Whereas once you put a center line down there, now, oh, car wants to pass you, but wait a second, that you're blocking them, and to go around you, they have to cross this yellow center line, and it just adds to so much stress. So the only place for mixed traffic in the Dutch criteria, like I say, is two-way streets without too much traffic and no center line. And if you have a 4-lane road, and boy, in America, do we have a lot of 4-lane roads? Well, then it's just simple. 4 lanes, boom. Bikes should be physically separated. We shouldn't even have to be in a bike lane on a 4-lane road. So those are the very simple Dutch criteria. That's the way they did this in Holland, and it works. Everybody's riding a bike. Okay, how about in the US? What are the US criteria for separation from traffic? And the answer is there really aren't any. NACTO, I'm glad to say, NACTO, that's the National Association of City and Transportation Officials. They did recently come out with some criteria, but the main highway design, which is AASHTO, there aren't any, and that's because state highway departments don't want to get themselves in trouble. They don't want to be sued. They don't want to put out a manual that says, on a road like this, bikes should be separated, when they have hundreds of miles of roads like that where bikes aren't separated. So they just avoided. So here's the thought experiment I did. I came up with some level of traffic stress criteria, and the research funding came from San Jose, so that's why we worked on San Jose. And in this clip of part of the map of San Jose, any street that's in green, that has very low stress. Mostly it's local streets. There also are some long curvy lines. Those are nice bike paths along in a canyon, along a creek. If it's blue, there isn't too much blue. That's LTS2. That's a little bit higher stress, but still not bad. If it's purple, that's LTS3. That's only for the enthused and concerned. And if it's tan, that's LTS4. That's like only the strong and fearless would want to ride there. And then I said, what if we erase all the stuff except the green? What if we erase, wait, I'll do it backwards. What if we erase LTS4? You say, I can't handle LTS4. Then here's your bike network. And you can start to see there's some gaps, like, wow, how do I get across here? There's no way to cross from here to there. And if I say, well, what about LTS2 people? And yikes, now there are gaps all over the place. You can't get across here. Wow, there's gaps. I can't get through. And LTS1 for children to ride, like, yeah, you can, if you live, get my mouse to show you can see, if you live in one of these neighborhoods, you can come out, ride around the block a few times, and you just better come right back home. You're not going to get any. So that's why I said if you want to look at bike network planning, you have to think about level of traffic stress. Because if you're willing to accept, if you want to say, where can bikes legally go? Well, of course, bikes could legally go anywhere. Yeah, you have to say, no, where would bicyclists who will accept only a limited amount of traffic stress, where can they go? And they can't go very far if this is what your network is like. So what are the LTS criteria? If a separated bike path, if you're separated from traffic, that's easy. That's LTS1. The problem is bike lanes. There can be very low stress bike lanes. And as I showed you a minute ago, there can be very high stress bike lanes. So we need some criteria. And how about being in mixed traffic? Being in mixed traffic can be very low stress on a nice, quiet local street. Being in mixed traffic can be high stress. So we need criteria for when the stress is low. So I have here criteria for bikes in mixed traffic. And so first, it depends on how many lanes there are. Do we have an unlaned two-way street? That's our two-way street without a center line. And then we go to two lanes per direction, 3 lanes per direction. The amount of traffic, average daily traffic, so some very low. And then what's the speed going across the top? And it's it's kind of easy to see as to have low traffic stress, LTS 1 or 2, you need to have a relatively low speed and not too much traffic. This is in mixed traffic. And so that makes sense. And you can I won't take time to look at the individual numbers. Then there are criteria for bike lanes. And there are actually 2 sets. One is for when they're not next to a parking lane, and one when they are next to a parking lane. So when they're not next to a parking lane, then you can have LTS 1 or 2, in some situations. But if we get to multiple roads and so on, then it's more stressful. But when there's a parking lane, I think those of you who cyclists know there's the risk that somebody's going to open their door and you get doored, and that can be really harmful. It can even kill people if the way your head hits the pavement or if a vehicle comes and runs you over. So it's a little harder to get LTS 1 when there's a bike lane next to a parking lane. Only if you got a really wide bike lane and a pretty low speed is it LTS 1. So once you have these things, then we can do a study of bike network connectivity and accessibility. So evaluating a bike network. So here's my definition for connection. 2 points, A and B, they're connected at LTS 2. You could substitute another LTS if we want, but let's say for now, they're connected at LTS 2 under these conditions. If there's a path from A to B and back again that uses only links with LTS 2 or less, and without undue detour. It makes sense, I hope. It's the main point to get across is it's what we call weakest link logic, the weakest link in the chain. You can't say, oh, I've got a route that goes to my work, and most of it is really low stress, LTS 1. Yeah, there's this one really bad section, it's LTS 4, but when you average it all together, it's actually pretty good. No, when it comes to danger, people don't average links. If there's one dangerous, stressful segment that I don't feel comfortable riding on, that's it. It's the weakest link. So there has to be a connection. You can get all the way from A to B without using high stress links. And it has to be without too much detour. And there are some specific detour criteria, like you shouldn't have to go more than 30% out of your way, and something else for really short distances. So that's connectivity from every point to every point. And then I can also look at the connectivity based on a given starting point, like based on my home, based on a certain neighborhood. And I can ask from that base, how many jobs can be reached, or how many homes can be reached, or how many supermarkets can be reached. And this is being reached by bike without exceeding a certain level of traffic stress. I'm using 2 as an example, but you could do the same thing with 1 or 3 or whatever, and without undue detour. So let me show you some examples here. From in San Jose, we looked at what places are connected to what. And it turns out that the city is all broken up. And by the way, if anybody from San Jose is listening, I want to acknowledge they've made some great improvements since I did this study in 2012. So San Jose is a lot better than what these things show today. But each color area, it means that the links that are in that color, you can get from one to another. But when there's another color, it means, nope, you can't get from here to there without passing through a high stress link. So if I were to move to San Jose back when this was done and get a job at San Diego State University, you see where SJSU is on the map. Gee, there sure wouldn't be many places I could live and be able to ride a bike to work without having to go through some stressful times. If we think about San Jose Community College, you see SJCC. It was a wonder to me when I went there. You know, San Jose is flat as a pancake. It's got gorgeous weather. Californians are, you know, they're all into fitness and being tanned and buff. And I thought, of all the places in the world, there should be thousands of bikes parked at San Jose Community College because people want to ride their bike. No, it's hardly any bikes at all. And this explains why. Because if you don't, unless you're willing to ride on high stress streets, man, there's only a tiny fraction of the area of the city that you can get there from. When you look at a map like this, it's easy to think, I can see where some critical links are. You know, there must be, if I could just get one or two critical links to be low stress between two of these colors. There's you see there's this long, narrow, kind of tan colored area on the lower left. There's a canyon in a creek, and it's great low stress riding. There are very few places where the street network connects to the canyon. And the few places where it does connect, it's connecting to a high stress street. Wow, if we could just, you know, make a low stress connection there. So yeah, just off the off the cuff, me and a friend who was from San Jose, we said, well, if we just make these little improvements, lots of little improvements, plus two roads, there are 2 or 3 roads there where we're saying, here we just need cycle tracks on these major roads. But then if we make improvements to this section, this intersection, this section, this section, this section, then I think we can start to knit some of these islands together. And sure enough, if we could make these, you know, colored places, LTS2, here's what the connectivity island starts to look like. Now, all of this is one connectivity island.
Hey, Peter,
Now,
sorry to interrupt. There was a question about, like, what's the approximate scale of this map that we're looking at?
Oh, okay. So let's say from San Jose State to San Jose Community College, that's about 2 miles.
Thank you.
So with that small set of improvements, now you could live in a lot of places and get the community college, the state college, downtown, you know, a lot of places. Obviously, we need more improvements than that because there's still a lot of neighborhoods that aren't connected. But that shows how you can put this, the level of traffic stress leads to connectivity study. And then accessibility, like I said, we ask how many people could, how many jobs could you get to, or how many supermarkets could you get to? So this is a map of the city of Boston. Downtown Boston is here. And we know where the people live and we know where the jobs are. And then we ask, is there from any given point, from any given home, how many jobs could you reach by bike? Jobs that are in Boston, Brookline, Somerville, or Cambridge. And we can ask how many can you reach with the network we have today and without going past LTS2, and how many could you reach if you made an improvement? So, and then we can look at the difference. This map shows the difference, how many more jobs you could make. And the difference we're looking at here is if we had contraflow on our local streets. I don't know about your Vermont cities and towns, but here in Boston, man, we have a lot of one-way streets. And if you're allowed to ride both ways, you can find a low stress route often where if you can't find one. So the dark color here means from these neighborhoods, you could reach 50,000 more jobs on a low stress bike route if only they would allow contraflow. And we've done studies like this. How many more supermarkets can you reach? How many more parks, whatever, can you reach? But how many can you reach on a bike? You have to say on a bike network that people will accept. And what they won't accept is to ride on a high stress route. So that's why low stress and connectivity go together. All right, now I'm gonna, there also are criteria for intersections. Sometimes intersections can be high stress. One high stress thing at a lot of American intersections are pocket bike lanes. Here's a pocket bike lane in Holland that's actually pretty low stress because, and when I say a pocket bike lane, it means bikes that are going straight and there are right turning cars to their right. What makes this a low stress pocket bike lane is that a car moving across the bike lane is clearly changing lanes, so there is no ambiguity about right of way. Second, the pocket lane, the right turn lane is really short, so there's no chance of a car passing you on the right. The cars that have moved over to the right are all going really slow. So that's the main thing. So we have some criteria for that. We have some criteria for unsignalized crossings. If there's no crossing island and you're crossing, let's say, 4 lanes, well, then it can become high stress. The crossing level of stress is high if you're crossing a 4-lane road and the traffic is, let's say, 35 miles an hour, and the traffic volume is more than 11,000, between 11 and 18,000. So we have some criteria for it's stressful to cross a street when it's unsignalized and the bikes don't have the right of way. There are some exceptions where trails are, and we have RRFBs. I don't know if rapid flashing beacons at trail crossings. They can make the crossings a lot less stressful. And then even at signalized intersections, there can be traffic stress. Most of the time, it's not stressful to cross a signalized intersection, but it can be stressful if you're just out there exposed for more than 100 feet. And there might be some other reasons. So, all right, that's the end. So yeah, I was aiming for keeping it down to 30 or 35 minutes so that we can have plenty of time for discussion. So let me take some questions. In a little while, maybe after the first round of questions, we'll look at a couple streets in Vermont and think about how LTS concerns might apply there. So
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. That was a great set of slides. Super interesting and a lot to take in. Folks, if you have a question, feel free to post it in the Q&A or in the chat or raise your hand. We do have one question queued up and ready to go. So the question was, I wonder how time of day is taken into account for LTS calculations. I think they're referring to rush hour being a lot busier, and AADT doesn't necessarily reflect those peak hour conditions.
Yeah, the way it's taken into account is we want it to be low stress during the busiest period. So there's usually a relationship between daily traffic, which is what ADT is about, and traffic in the busiest hour. So
yeah, thank you. Let's see, we just got a question from Brett. What's your opinion on letting bikes go both ways on a one-way? It's referring to contraflow there.
Yeah, exactly. What you call contraflow. Well, my opinion is summed up by the title of an article that I read about this. It was written in French by, as it was from France, and it said, "There is no life without contraflow." You know, if you live on a street that's one way, when you come out of your home, if the destination you want to go to is to your left, but the street, the one-way restriction is there. When you're walking, well, you just walk whichever way you want. You say this one way is not for me. And in a bike, almost all of us do the same thing. Why? You know, one-way restrictions. So first of all, you should know virtually no street or road in the world was built to be a one-way road. One-way came later because, yikes, there's so many cars. So it was either so we can provide more spaces for people to park, or so we can have more efficient flow with like one-way couplets through downtown. Is 100% for cars. And pedestrians were protected from that restriction because nobody applies one-way restrictions to sidewalks. Well, bikes should be exempt also. It's not for us. And then as far as the safety, unless you're talking about, you know, a road where cars are going fast and multiple lanes, but on our local streets, it is so safe. It's been tested again and again. You know, the Dutch did it everywhere, and the Belgians looked at that and they said, we'll try it. And after 19 years, they said, well, we got this one neighborhood of Brussels that tried it they've done it for 15 years now, and we haven't had any bicyclists get hurt. So Belgium just said, do it everywhere. Germany said, they are breaking the law. We cannot allow this. But they finally, they said, well, the Dutch are doing it. Let's try it. They tried it for a while. They said, well, we did have a couple of crashes, but they were with bikes going in the right way. No crashes with bikes going the wrong way. So they said, yep, you can do it. France changed their law and said, instead of saying, why should we do contraflow? Now it's, why shouldn't we? You got to justify not doing it. You should be doing it everywhere. So yeah, I'm all in favor of it.
Yeah, and we do have here in Burlington on South Winooski an example of a contraflow street that I think works pretty well. It's pretty comfortable.
So, but there's two kinds of ways to do contraflow. One is with contraflow lanes. So that's probably what you're having. You
Correct.
Mentioned.
Yeah.
And that can make sense on a busy road. But on our quiet local streets, we don't need contraflow lanes. Just a sign. Bikes are allowed to go both directions.
Got it.
It just becomes a two-way street. It's one way for cars, but it's two-way for bikes.
Sure. All right, a few more questions. Are two-way cycle tracks or two-way separated paths along a road a good solution to reduce stress?
So the short answer is yes, they're a terrific solution. Paths, when you put a bike path alongside a road, cycle track, you have the option of having unidirectional paths, one on each side of the road, or a two-way path on one side or other. Each has its advantage. The advantage with the one-way, the biggest advantage with the one-way is at transitions, where if I've got a section with a bike path and then that bike path ends and now bikes have to like do their normal thing, which is like to ride in the shoulder. Well, in the normal thing, you're always on the right side of the road. So if I end a two-way path, then one direction at least is on the wrong side of the road and they're going to have to cross the street. So if you have just a little section of a road that gets a path and before and after doesn't, yeah, then it's better to, the one-way paths keeps bikes on their side. But like Montreal has a ton of these. And what they just make sure is until the road ends, the path doesn't end. So the bikes are never left stranded on the wrong side. One-way paths are, they make things simpler at intersections, at complicated intersections. But two-way paths have two real big advantages. One is they require less space, because to make space for bikes, you not only need the space for the bicyclists themselves, but also a little bit of a buffer from traffic. And when you have a two-way path, you only need one buffer. And then here's the big one. On a two-way path, it's, of course, going to be wide enough for two bicyclists. Well, most of the time, there's nobody coming in the other direction, so you can ride side by side with a friend. You know, in a car, you get to sit side by side with a friend or with your kid or your partner or whatever. Why not riding a bike? So a two-way path, it gives us a way to do that. Copenhagen, they've taken a strong stand against two-way paths. They said, oh, we had bad safety experiences with it. When we tried a few in the 1970s, they say, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. The Netherlands, they were cautious about doing them. They've done some, and now they're doing more two-way paths than ever. And they've got some techniques to, there are safety challenges at intersections, but they've come up with techniques to overcome those safety challenges and make those two-way paths really nice and safe, even at intersections. So they can be a great idea.
Great, thank you for that. This question, can you go over how to create LTS2 from unconnected areas? So I think what that's getting at is sort of more rural areas and how LTS applies on rural roads, which we of course have a lot of here in Vermont.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so if our rural roads had shoulders, then fine, they'd be bike lanes, that's nice. But the standard US practice is, yeah, shoulders cost a lot of money. So we only put them if the traffic is high. So I know you're not usually getting a shoulder. So let's see, you know, I honestly haven't thought that much about rural areas. But if we look at the criteria, I'm gonna find the spot. Share my screen. Okay, so when you're not next to a parking lane, which would include a shoulder, and you got one through lane per direction, which is the way most of our rural roads are. This says you got LTS2 if the traffic is going 35 miles an hour or less. But if it's like most rural roads and cars are going more like 45 miles an hour, then that's LTS3. And so that's if you have a shoulder. If you don't have a shoulder, that means you're in mixed traffic. So if this rural road doesn't have a center line, you can still get to LTS2 with, you know, speed up to close to 40 miles an hour with low traffic, close to 35 miles an hour with pretty low traffic. If there's a center line, then it's well, I guess, okay, if there's a center line, yeah, then the ADT limits are different. But it gets harder to reach that. So what the Dutch do on their roads is they put bike lanes on all their roads, even when there's not room for them, by using advisory bike lanes. But I don't think that's going to happen on American rural roads until we have more bicyclists, because people would be too confused by them. So yeah, so
and we're certainly hoping for advisory lanes to be allowed sometime soon here in Vermont, because yeah, we have a lot of rural roads that I think they'd be a great solution there. And we do have a whole webinar on advisory lanes posted on our website, which I can share in the chat here in a minute if folks are interested
sweet.
in that. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay.
How widely used, you know, and I think after this question, we'll go to the local examples that we wanted to look at, Peter, but how widely used or accepted and how standardized are the LTS ratings?
Oh, that's a good question. How widely used? Everywhere. I should say everywhere, except, however, there's a difference between and everywhere, I mean like in cities all over the US. That's if somebody's doing a bike network evaluation, and that's usually a consultant gets called in, help us evaluate our bike network. nearly all the consultants, or if it's done in-house, nearly everybody is using LTS. Now, they'll often tailor LTS so it can be sort of non-standardized. Some tailor it in a what I would say is a very thoughtful, careful way, like Montgomery County, Maryland. They said we want a LTS 2.5. We have something kind of in the middle. So I thought that's a cool refinement. Other places, unfortunately, the changes that they're making are because they don't have the data. So then they just have to do a really crude approximation. And then, who knows, it's up there calling LTS. Some of the streets that they then end up calling LTS2 are actually 3. Some of the 3s are actually 2s. So every study with LTS is not equal, because some took the time and spent the money to get the data to really support it, and others just tried to make approximations. But LTS isn't used everywhere when it comes to planning and design. So you guys have told me about, here's a street that's going to be repaved, and what should we do? It's time to design it. So that comes up all over the place. And there aren't too many cities that have said, when we do stuff, we do LTS 1, or when we do stuff, we do LTS 2. But there aren't too many, but again, there aren't so few. So Vancouver has made, these are our criteria we follow. And like I said, NACTO has put out a book, here's what you should be doing. And so any street that says we're going to follow NACTO, yeah, they're basically using it. So there's an answer.
Yeah, and I believe Mass DOT, they don't talk about it as LTS, but they do have pretty strict criteria in terms of what infrastructure gets placed on a roadway based on speed and volume.
Yeah, exactly. They have that separation and for speed and volume. Exactly. Yeah. And it's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go to the local example streets that we're going to look at, Peter. And
yeah, sure. So one of them is the northern stretch of Main Street in St. Albans. So I'll go there, and the big question there is whether to have a road diet. So it's the wrong kind of screen. Yeah. It's sorry. Usually I'm pretty good with my maps here. Okay. Here we are. So coming from the north, here's the exit to get onto Route 7, and then this northern stretch of Route 7 before you get into the street. Here it's 1 lane per direction. But if I go a little bit further north, it's 2 lanes per direction. So a good question is, hey, some parts of this road are doing fine with 1 lane per direction. So this other part, if we reduced it to 1 lane per direction, like up here, let's get away from the intersection. We have 2 lanes per direction and a left turn lane. What if we made it 1 lane per direction with a left turn lane? Then that frees up all kinds of space that we can use, of course, for bike lanes, protected bike lanes, off-road path. Lots of options if you free up the space. So from a network perspective, if you say, well, is there a parallel route that bicyclists can use here? Well, obviously, no. To get to any of these neighborhoods on the side, to get to any of the shops and destinations along here. The only road to get there is Route 7. So no, from a network perspective, we need a low stress route. And then how to achieve it is because of, if you're going to leave it 2 lanes per direction, then it has to be a separated path. So that's one option. And then the other option is with the road diet, well, then you got lots of space. Then you can have separated path, and still it should be a separated path, but it's easy to make a separated path because you got a lot of space if you have a road diet. When I'm asked, can you have a road diet? This needs some traffic analysis or something, but the main thing I look for is, well, how many lanes are feeding them? And if you got a section where there's only 1 lane feeding it, like we come down here, hey, there's only 1 lane feeding it. There's only 1 lane feeding it. Why do we need 2 lanes? So there's some pretty good evidence that 1 lane would be enough. And so that the bottlenecks are always the intersections. So somebody's going to do a study at the intersections. Sometimes, so like at a signalized intersection like this, sometimes if the intersections are spaced far enough apart, you can add an extra lane just at the intersection, get rid of the lane a little bit after the intersection. The other key to making road diets successful on a street like this is if you can convert these intersections to roundabouts, because so I see this side street, it hardly has any traffic. So with a roundabout, then 1 lane can carry a lot of traffic, and you might not need a signalized intersection. Although this one, even with a signalized intersection, you can probably do it. So that'll need traffic. But yeah, the simple answer is gotta have low LTS. And the only way to do it is with a cyclotron, separated bike lane. So it's either a separated bike lane and you still have 4 lanes, or a road diet. And then well, let's take some comments about this before we go on to the next one.
Yeah, well, I think a relevant question, especially when you're looking at a road this wide, was asked earlier. You know, the behavior of drivers has a big impact on traffic stress. So what's the best way to improve driver behavior? You know, so
to 1 lane per direction, absolutely. Because you see, 2 lanes per direction means you can pass. And when you can pass, you can speed. It's just so simple. If you can pass, you can speed. Take away the option to pass, and you've almost wiped out the possibility of speeding. So in one realm of life after another, Americans have been learning that, hey, you know what? Less is more. And one of those areas is this. Where before we thought, oh, well, wider roads are always better. That, you know, because just in case, it's good to have a wider road. Wider roads promote speeding. They make it dangerous to cross the street. You know, you got shops along this road. Sometimes there's a shop on each side of the street. A person wants to cross and get to the other. And crossing streets like this is really dangerous. And when there's 1 lane per direction, you make it so much safer. Traffic is so much orderly. So I would advise any highway department, any cities or states, look at all your multi-lane roads. And if it's at all possible to cut it to 1 lane per direction, that's way better for safety. Do that.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it's also less to repave. So save yourself some money.
And less to plow.
Yeah. Relevant question when we're looking at a shared use path, especially, you know, does the concept of level of traffic stress apply within the bike infrastructure? So like when a kid on a bike has to share the lane with a commuter on an e-bike, do you think about sort of what the level of stress within the bike lane is for that kid when there are adults on e-bikes going around?
No, I wish that was the only thing we had to worry about.
Right.
No, I just, you know, remember there's this concept of stress, and you know, how many people say, oh, I don't feel safe riding my bike on that path because of, you know, because there are so many pedestrians. You might feel like, you know, if I want to go ride on this path, I better not go on the peak dog walking time at, 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. But otherwise I'll go. So that's not traffic stress. That's something else. And no, we don't worry about fast bicyclists mixing with slow ones. Who knows? If it becomes a problem that really affects people, then we could add it. But right now, no.
Yeah, I think NACTO is starting to look a little more at, the different types and sizes of bikes and how infrastructure needs to change to accommodate all of that. They put out an interesting white paper recently that we can
I don't
share.
think that's mostly a Vermont problem.
I don't think so either. Yeah, but it is interesting to have that kind of forward-looking research being done. One more question, actually, a couple questions came in regarding lane width. What are your thoughts on a real practical minimum lane width and how that connects to LTS lane width for cars? I mean,
yeah, it's not so important except to the extent that it's creating more space for cyclists. So, I think everybody should know 10 feet is the standard width of a lane and has been since time immemorial. There's a chicken and egg thing. You shouldn't make a car or a truck that won't be able to fit in a lane. And you got to make your lane big enough to fit the vehicles. Well, the 10-foot lane has been with us since we had horse-drawn carriages. It's just been with us since time immemorial. So every motor vehicle built can fit in a 10-foot lane. If you want the large motor vehicles, the trucks, to be able to comfortably go fast, like on a freeway, then make it a 12-foot lane. If you don't want them to comfortably go fast through your town, what are you making 12-foot lanes for? This is ridiculous. So, like in Boston, they like to have 11-foot lanes where they have buses. But in Washington, Philadelphia, the same size buses get along okay in 10-foot lanes. So, yeah, 10 is enough. But if you got buses and trucks and you got enough space, yeah, give them 11. It's all right.
Yeah, it is of course, that lane width is going to have some effect on car speeds, which is going to influence your LTS. And
yeah, but not much. The main thing with car speeds is passing.
mm-hmm.
If there are 2 lanes and I can per direction and I can pass, that makes every difference.
Yeah.
And if there's a wide shoulder, and just how wide does the road appear to be, the 10 versus 11-foot lane on a road that otherwise the same, it hardly makes a difference.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're right at 10:59. We did have another road example that we were thinking about getting to, but we got so many awesome questions. I thought it was more important to get to those.
Okay.
So folks, definitely feel free to reach out to Susan or I if you have more questions, and we can do our best to answer them, or maybe try and get an answer out of Peter if he's willing. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. This has been great. I hope it's been helpful for you all. Again, we're always here as a resource to you. Looking at Susan and I are creating a webinar series that's really intended to help local advocates on their sort of journeys to improving their places for walking and biking. So keep an eye out for that. Another upcoming event in the Burlington area that folks might want to keep an eye out is our free screening of The Engine Inside. That's on October 14th at 7 p.m. At the Film House at Main Street Landing. Seats are limited there, so reservations are required. And we'll put the link in the follow-up email to that. So thanks again, everyone. Thank you so much to Peter and to Susan for pulling this together, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.